Welcome to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe, where you'll find the unique, the bizarre, and sometimes the haunted. Feel free to look around, peruse the items, and never fear, there's nothing here that bites. Hard anyway. Hello there, and welcome to Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today I'm glad you stopped by the shop because we've got a very interesting item. If you'll take a look over here, this old key. Now, this key is a key to a basement door, and while basements have held some form of terror for us from childhood to even today for some of us, the horrors behind the door that this key opens are truly unsettling. So without further ado, let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new Shudder exclusive, Baghead. So before we get into the podcast proper, I do have to kind of explain some things that are going on with the podcast. The week of Easter, I had a little bit of an existential crisis where I just wasn't sure what I was doing with this podcast, whether I even wanted to keep doing the podcast. Like I've talked about this on the show before, how on our old platform, I was doing really good numbers. The numbers were building with each and every episode. I was really excited, but the podcast platform that I was using to host the podcast just wasn't very reliable. And of course, they had technical problems and were just incommunicado with anybody that had a podcast on their platform. So I decided to change to a new podcast platform. And with this new platform, just the audience hasn't transferred over. I lost the audience and I've been trying to build it back, and it's been a slow process. I can't say steady. I mean, our numbers are gaining little by little with each episode, but it's just not the growth that we had in the first year of our podcast on this other platform. So, I was really kind of disappointed about that, but I really love what I do. So I decided, to make this podcast a little more accessible to more people. I decided I'm going to do things a little bit different. I kind of do the theater of the mind in character intro. I've never been 100% happy with that, going from this creepy shopkeeper persona character that I was doing to start the podcast and then just going into me being me. So we're going to forego that. You'll still get that little bit of a creepy intro. I think it's creepy for now. Who knows? I may freshen that up at some point, but I'm ditching the theatrics at the beginning, and we're going to be doing some shorter episodes. Most of my episodes end up being anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour long. I know some people don't want to sit there for an hour listening to me drone on and on. So I'm going to try to keep the episodes, at least the main episodes, right around a half hour. And then, of course, we'll have even shorter random curiosities and whatnot. But hopefully, me keeping things pithy and not bloviating on stuff and, the whole stream of consciousness ramblings that they usually do, I can keep things concise and keep things tight and hopefully put out a better show for you, the listener, because I really want to do the best that I can. And I'm always trying to grow and learn in this whole podcast game. So that's kind of what we're doing. So I am going to keep doing the podcast because I do enjoy talking about horror, fantasy, and science fiction. That was the week after Easter. And this week, I hurt my back. So I have not been able to go out to see any movies. I didn't get to see any of the movies I wanted to watch last week when I was having the existential crisis. Godzilla X Kong, Immaculate, First Omen came out this weekend, and I never got to go see it because my back has been killing me. It is all I can do to sit here in my studio and not writhe in pain as I'm doing this podcast. So I'm hopefully going to be able to get to see those movies, and whether I do full episodes or maybe here's what I missed while I'm having back issues and what was me issues. Who knows how we're going to do that, but I wanted to get back into things, and there was a movie that I saw over the weekend that is exclusive to Shudder, and it just came out. It's called Baghead, and I wasn't quite sure what to make of this movie because just by the name, it just made me think of that horrible movie that came out a year or two ago on Shudder. I believe it was an original or an exclusive called Slapface. And I wanted to like that so much. I just didn't. And I think everyone involved, they were doing their best. It just wasn't that well done of a story. I think it needed some rewrites. I think it needed a little more explanation. I think the effects could have been better. The creature design was cool, but I had fears that Baghead was going to be a lot like that. And I went into it fairly cold. I didn't watch the trailer. I didn't really know much about it other than what you saw on the movie poster or on the display when you click Shudder. That's it. That's all I knew. I didn't even realize who was going to be in it until I pushed play and found out that Freya Allen was in it, Ruby Barker was in it, and I was quite pleased. I was like, oh, okay, they've got some decent actors. Jeremy Irvine is in this. And this is a film directed by Roberto Corredor, and he is the director who directed the short that this movie is based on. There was a short written by Lorcan Riley back in 2017. They did a short film directed by Alberto Corredor, and that's pretty much it. That's all he's directed. He directed the short for this and the feature film for this, and that is the extent of his credits as far as I've seen. Now, the writers for this, of course, Lorcan Riley is credited as a writer, but he wrote the short that this is based on, so that's why he got that writing credit. Christina Pammies, not a writer I'm familiar with. I believe this is like her first feature-length writing project, but Bryce McGuire, who wrote and directed Night Swim, he also gets a writing credit on this. Now, I will say we are going to go straight into spoilers. That's kind of another change we're going to make. Normally, I try to do a non-spoilery section and then go into a spoiler section and try to walk that line. But for my money, I've got to talk about this movie, and I've got to talk about it as concisely as possible. So we're going to forego a spoiler-free section and get right into spoilers. If you haven't watched this movie, go watch Baghead. It's on Shudder. I've made no bones about this. I think Shudder is well worth it if you love horror to get it, because you get a lot of really cool original movies from Shudder. You get a lot of exclusives on Shudder. You get a lot of the classic horror, TV and film on Shudder, and it's well worth the money. So go check out Baghead if you haven't watched it. But if you have, or you don't care one way or the other, we're going to head into some spoiler territory. So the basic premise of this movie, if you look on IMDb, a young woman inherits a rundown pub. She discovers a dark secret within its basement. This creature, this witch Baghead, she's a shape-shifting creature, and she allows you to speak with loved ones that you've lost, but not without consequence. And that really is fairly accurate. I mean, sometimes these little synopses of movies, it isn't really very fair to the movie, or maybe makes the movie sound a lot better than it actually is. But I think that is the basis of this movie. And I think it's a really interesting idea. It kind of reminded me of Talk to Me, how that was a really interesting idea. I don't think it was executed as well as people make it out. Talk to Me had a couple really scary scenes, but the rest of it was just like young Gen Zers being kids. And to me, that I didn't care for the movie as a whole. I thought it had some good ideas. I thought it had some good scary moments. But for the most part, I thought it was a bit overrated. But it was based on a really interesting idea, which I think this is one of those movies where you have this creature, and I would have liked this creature to be explained a lot less. And we'll get into some of my thoughts on the storytelling a little bit later, but I would have liked to have known less about this. But this is a creature that is a witch that was burned, and because of her witchcraft, she now essentially lives forever, and they keep this bag over her head because it keeps her powers at bay. And there again, there was just things about it that I'm like, it was creepy and weird, and I didn't need anything explained to me. I would have been happy if this is just what it is. And when they tried to explain it, it just took away some of the mystique of this creature. And I know I'm walking a really fine line, because sometimes I want things to be explained a little more. Sometimes I don't think things need explained as much as they are. I might as well get into this. As far as storytelling goes, I thought they did some information dumps explaining things a couple times One of them worked for me, one of them didn't work. There is a VHS tape that our main character, Iris, her father, leaves to whoever is going to own this pub next and take on this curse of the Baghead character. And he leaves a VHS tape where he records himself talking about the rules. And I thought that was an interesting way. It was kind of a last will and testament that somebody that knows that they're going to die, probably going to die, and he's leaving the information that's going to be necessary to whoever is going to inherit this curse. So that information dump, that exposition really worked for me. I thought, oh, that's not a new way, and it's not maybe it's not a terribly interesting way to do it, but I thought it was a good way to give some exposition and set up the situation that we're in. Now, there's one later where the Katie character is talking to Baghead, and Baghead appears as this ghost of a former owner of this pub. And then we just get in flat out exposition with a montage of old photographs and bits of animation, the whole backstory of the Baghead character. And I thought that was a little forced. It felt like an exposition dump. And I didn't enjoy that at all. It really felt like it just stopped the movie. And here we're going to tell you the history of this antagonistic character. It just didn't feel natural at all. But that's one of the things I thought it was cool about this idea, is that you have this witch that can shapeshift, and she shapeshifts into the form of a lost loved one, and the lost loved one almost possesses her. And when you're talking to her, you have 2 minutes, and in that 2 minutes, your lost loved one is in control of her, and you're quite literally talking to the ghost of that lost loved one. But after that 2 minutes up, then she takes control, and then she starts to manipulate you through this lost loved one. And it was something that could have been very contrived and very complicated and been a little too much going on. But I think they handled it well. They didn't try to explain too much with exposition. They just let some things happen. Now, there was a bit of exposition from the Neil character played by Jeremy Irvine that felt a little, okay, this is your first time doing this, but how do you know what's supposed to happen next? So sometimes the exposition worked, sometimes it didn't work. But I like that some of the things, they just let it happen, and you get to understand the rules of the game as they go. That one scene where Baghead is coming towards Iris, and Iris tells Baghead to stop, and she stops. And you get, oh, okay, she owns this pub. She is in control. Baghead has to listen to her. You get that. I mean, you also get a line where somebody actually says that out loud. You didn't need that, but I liked how some of the rules of the game were actually shown before they told you. And in some cases, they didn't need to actually tell you. But the setup of the story, I think, is good. You have a father who owns this pub and has taken on this curse. He dies trying to end this curse. His estranged daughter inherits the place. Unbeknownst to him, he doesn't think that she's going to inherit it. It's just going to go to somebody else, or he's going to die trying. But she gets this pub, and it's kind of like an off the beaten path pub. There's like not a lot of traffic around it, and it really feels like one of those old British pubs that have been around for, a couple centuries or more. And the atmosphere inside this was very creepy. It felt very haunted house. I kind of thought as I'm watching this movie, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be like a haunted house story. It wasn't, but it had that vibe about it and the old creepiness of a house that, if it's not haunted, it should be. I liked how the Baghead creature is kept down in the basement, because basements inherently are creepy. From the time we were kids, we were all afraid of the basement. And I think some of us, even as adults, aren't terribly fond of dark, creepy basements. And while I think this basement, it didn't have the creepiness that it probably could have had, because a lot of times it is very well lit and it is a very open space. There's not a lot of places for things to hide, but there's this hole in the back wall where Baghead goes and into the darkness. And that to me was kind of creepy. Kind of gave me the feel of some of those old artesian wells that some old houses have. I think they went into that with one of the Amityville horror movies, an old artesian well. I can't remember if it was the second or the third one, but that kind of had that vibe about it. Like, you go into the darkness behind this hole in the wall and you could very well be going into hell. And then when you finally do get to go there in the end, it was almost felt maybe not maze-like, but it did have a lot of twists and turns, and you had this creepy vibe about it. Now, one of the things I really liked about this movie was the cast. I thought the cast was really good. I was pleasantly surprised to see Freya Allan as the lead Iris Lark. Of course, Freya Allan, we all know her from The Witcher fame. She was also in The World's miniseries, Into the Badlands. I know she's got a new movie coming out. She's going to be in the new Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I'm really excited to see that. But everybody knows Freya Allan from The Witcher. I thought she does a great job as the Iris character, playing that estranged daughter who doesn't understand why her father didn't want her in his life, and then coming to terms with that, coming from nothing and wanting to use this Baghead character to try and make money. You wonder why people in horror movies do stupid things, and sometimes there's a lot of stupid reasoning, but she comes from nothing. She has nothing. And the prospect of somebody paying her thousands of pounds to be able to see their lost loved one in this little ritual with Baghead, that anybody would be tempted by that, let alone somebody who's never had anything in their life. So I really liked how she played that, and it was very believable. I thought that Ruby Barker as Katie, her best friend, it was a character that was unnecessarily necessary. She didn't really add much to the story other than being Iris's best friend, and she was there to do things to propel the story forward that the Iris character couldn't do, or they didn't have the Iris character do. A lot of the investigation stuff, a lot of the voice of reason sort of lines of dialogue, trying to talk Iris out of staying in this pub, talking Iris out of exploiting the Baghead powers for her own financial gain. Now, Ruby Barker's not an actress I am completely familiar with, but I know my wife watches that show Bridgerton, and she is on that. So I did know her from there, or at least my wife telling me she was from there. Jeremy Irvine plays Neil. Neil was an interesting character in this because at first he seems like a sympathetic guy. He just wants to see his lost wife, and then he finally gets to talk to his wife. You find out that he just wants to talk to her to find out if she was cheating on him, and then the revelation later that he actually slipped her a Mickey before she ended up leaving and driving and being killed in a car accident. So he essentially killed his wife, and that he's willing to kill Iris to be able to have the power of Baghead at his disposal whenever he wants. And that final scene, or not final scene, but one of the final scenes where he's plotting with Baghead about how he will treat her right, just as long as he can see his lost wife whenever he feels. And it was a really like, oh shit, this guy is not the guy I thought he was at the beginning of this. You had the possibility that he could have been a bad guy, because in situations like this where there's supernatural powers, there's always got to be a human element that is ne'er-do-well. But I enjoyed his performance. Peter Mullen as Owen Lark, the father of Freya. He's not in this much, but he is such a fantastic actor. And if you're not familiar with Peter Mullen, he's been in a ton of different movies and TV series. I think I've known him more for his time on Westworld. He played James Delos. He was also in Ozark as Jacob Snell. I thought he was really good in that. He was in Hostiles. Just a ton of great movies and television. He played King Durin III in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. One of his more recent things. I know there's a lot of people that don't like that show, and we won't get into that, but fantastic actor. I really loved what we got of him, I mean, he kind of brought I use this word a lot. Everybody uses this word a lot of gravitas to the cast, where you've got a bunch of young actors that are really good young actors. Freya Allen's a good young actress. Ruby Barker is a good young actress, but you have this veteran that just adds that weight to a cast that's young like this. I thought he did a good job and was a good addition to this cast. But I really liked the story of all these characters. I thought they did a really good job with setting up Iris as this red herring, because you think she is going to be the one, and her father gives her the warning of not to use the power of Baghead too much, because Baghead will get into your head and start manipulating you. And they set up this red herring because she uses Baghead to talk to her father and kind of get that closure. And you think she's going to be the one that ends up being manipulated and kind of almost a possession type of thing. And you find out that it wasn't her. It was the Neil character. I think they did a good job setting up Freya as, like I said, this red herring, but they also set up Neil as the real human bad guy in this quite well. And they did it incrementally, and they gave you all the reasons to, in hindsight, say, oh yeah, I saw that coming. Whether you did or you didn't, you could put the pieces together to think, oh, okay, yeah, this guy was the bad guy all along. Now, the effects of this movie, I think, in some regards, they were good. In some regards, they weren't so good. Where they did a really good job with, like, the set dressing and the art design and direction, and the creature design on Baghead was really creepy and disturbing. I thought they did a good job with the effects on Baghead. The transformation scenes I thought were really good. You didn't have to do much facially because they kept the bag over her head. What reason? They never really give a reason as to why this bag has some sort of secret power or anything, and I don't think you needed to. It's just part of the rules. I'm glad they didn't try to explain that, or at least I don't remember them explaining that. But it did allow them to make these shape-shifting transformations, at least facially, underneath this bag, so you didn't have to have, like, shitty CG. They did some CG on the hands, transforming from this old crone with knobby knuckles to, a younger hand, a female hand, a male hand, whatever. I thought they did a good job with that. The transformation, though, of Baghead, I thought they did a good job on that. There are some other scenes, though, with CG fire, and while the fire looks good, sometimes it just looks like CG fire on a stairway that's not burning, or when they had the Peter Mullen character, Owen Lark, set himself on fire, and he runs upstairs, he's on fire, and you can tell that it's CG fire. It didn't look horrible. When the basement starts to catch fire and there's fire in the hallway, that's where the CG fire looked a little fake. There were also some scenes where Baghead is going full witchy mode and she's crawling on the ceilings, because that's what you have to do anymore in horror, is you have to have somebody crawling on the ceiling. I thought that, well, like I said, the creature design of Baghead looked creepy and disturbing and very, old crone witch. Having her superimposed on the ceiling, it's like they had her crawling on a green screen and then like superimposed that on the ceiling. It didn't look great. I've seen it done a lot better, and I get it. This is a lower budget film, but it just didn't look that great. Now, I liked the ending of this. I thought the ending was very dark, and you don't know if you're going to get a happy ending when it comes to some of these films, or you're going to get the ending where everyone dies. I think this movie was a lot like the ending of another Shudder exclusive or Shudder original that came out this past Christmas, The Sacrifice Game, where the demon escapes. The demon has been set in this old school and trapped there for centuries, and through manipulation and machinations, it finally gets released. And that's what you get with this. You have Baghead trapped in this basement and confined there. And there's a moment where Baghead professes to Iris that they're both prisoners, because Iris is a prisoner because she has accepted this curse of being the caretaker of Baghead, and Baghead is imprisoned in this. And it was a situation where Neil kills Iris, but then he brings Iris back through Baghead to sign over the deed so he can be in control of Baghead. But that's kind of what Baghead wanted all along, because as the caretaker of the place and of Baghead, Iris is in control. And when Baghead summons the spirit of Iris into her, she is now both the Baghead witch and Iris all at the same time, so she can control herself. It was complicated, but not complicated. It was fun to wrap your mind around that. And it wasn't a plot convenience that you get in some movies or shows. It really showed that Baghead was manipulating this and pulling the strings to get to this point all along. And she ends up killing Neil and leaving. And she's freed herself out into the world to take revenge on a world that cursed her and killed her and rejected her as being a witch, all because she had powers of clairvoyancy. So I dug the ending. You didn't get a happy ending because the Iris character is killed. She doesn't get a happy ending, but this Baghead character is freed, and much like in the Sacrifice game, you don't know, now that she's out in the world, what sort of hell is going to be wrought because of this. And I like endings like that leave you with like a kind of a jaw-dropping ending. I wouldn't call this ending necessarily jaw-dropping, but it was oh shit, they went this route. And they leave it open-ended enough to where your mind's allowed to wander. What could happen next? What is going to happen next? Once the screen fades to black and the credits roll, what happens next? And I dig open-ended movies and open-ended endings just like that. So all in all, I thought this was a pretty good movie. It wasn't a great movie. It did have its flaws. It had some exposition dumps that just didn't feel necessary or were not done well. But they did have some exposition that was done well. I think the VHS scene with Peter Mullen's character, I thought that was good exposition. It had some jump scares, and it not horrible jump scares. I think it was any of the jump scares were all a part of the action of the movie. They were quick cuts. You didn't get a huge big bang or sound effect to startle you. I think the sound effects and the score were enough to let you know something's going on, but not enough to startle you into being scared. It was more, like I said, the action of the horror on the screen, which if you're going to do a jump scare, if you can do it like that, I can be a little more forgiving of that. Well, the effects weren't great. They were good in all the right places. The effects on the shape-shifting and the effects on Baghead for the most part, the creature design, the practical makeup, all of that was all done very well, and it was a very creepy and eerie character. The acting was all really good. Freya Allen, I think, led this cast in and did a fantastic job with this character of Iris Lark. Peter Mullen was a fantastic character and actor in this. What little screen time he got, Jeremy Irvine and Ruby Barker, I thought all did really well. Ann Muller played Baghead. Now, while her performance wasn't so much vocal as it was physical, I thought she did a really good job with the creepy movements of Baghead, which I enjoyed that performance. Added to the creepiness, added to the atmosphere, and the otherworldliness of this character. And it was a really interesting idea for a story. Like I said, the idea that there is this creature, this witch that can transform into a lost loved one and channel their spirit. So it is almost like you were talking to your lost loved one for at least 2 minutes. But then because it has its own machinations and its own wants, it then takes over and tries to manipulate you. It was a little bit convenient that she could still manipulate things magically out of the basement, but that may be a little bit of a plot stretch. but it did allow for some creepy things to happen outside of the basement, ghostly apparitions and things moving in the background. I got that from an atmosphere and from a creepy old pub that is quasi-haunted aesthetic. I didn't mind that. But once you got into the basement, the horror of this character and the horror of this creature and the horror of the things that go on and the idea of this clairvoyant creature that can channel dead spirits and allow you to talk to them is just a creepy idea. And it's an interesting idea that I thought they did well enough with this. I haven't watched the original short. I've been trying to find it. I haven't found it on YouTube. I'm still looking for it. I'm hoping to check it out at some point and see how it compares to this full-length feature. But I thought, all in all, it's an interesting idea and story from Lorcan Riley, who I want to say he's done something else that we've talked about on the show not too long ago, but I can't think of what it is. But between him, Bryce McGuire, Christina Pammies, Alberto Corredor, all did a fantastic job writing an interesting story and directing what I thought was a pretty good film. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Baghead. Check it out on Shudder if you haven't watched it. If you have, hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I have. You can check out more about what's going on with Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe on our Facebook and Instagram pages. We're always posting about horror, fantasy, and science fiction, as well as our latest episodes. Speaking of, I'm not sure. I'm going to try and get to the theater at some point this week so I can catch the first Omen, and hopefully we'll have that for Thursday's show, and then I'll get caught up with the rest of those movies that I really wanted to watch. Godzilla X Kong, Immaculate. There's a lot of good stuff out in theaters right now, or at least so I've heard, and we'll try and catch up on those when we can, but be listening and check it out on our social media pages for all the latest on when those new episodes are coming out. And speaking of, follow us, subscribe to us, like us, whatever your podcast platform of choice calls it, do that. When you follow us there, you're going to be able to stay on top of all the latest episodes that come out, whether they be the Monday and Thursday episodes, or whether they be the bonus episodes or random curiosities or some of our other features. You'll get all the latest drops as they happen. And of course, please leave those reviews. 5 stars would be awesome, but whatever review you leave, we do appreciate that. So until next time. Thank you for visiting Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. We hope that you found something to your liking and visit the shop again soon. But even though you may come back, you never really get to leave Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe.